evening to you all out there in Internet Land. I'm back with the Modern Age of Batman, 1986 to present. By 1985, Batman was getting, and most of DC's comic line was getting convoluted. Every character like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and all the others had parallel universes, and it was confusing the readers. So in 1985, DC Comics decided to hit the reboot button with a massive story arc called Crisis Infinite Earth, which would end that at the time that line of stories, and then they would hit the reset button the following year. Well, Batman emerged relatively unscathed from the rebooting. He was still introduced as from next 1986. He was introduced as having still being a established hero, but they went into his origin in a lot more detail with the famed story arc Batman Year One, originally published in 4 parts, then later collected in graphic novel format. And at this time too, they introduced Jason Todd. Even though he was introduced in the early 80s, his reboot was different. His time as Batman's sidekick would be short. I think no more than 1 year. So he was more of a tragic character. He was now a street orphan that survived on the street. Batman found him trying to steal his Batmobiles. After the events that led him to become the new Robin, his Robin tenure was ended tragically. In 1988, the DC Comics did a very bold move by introducing a 1-900 number voting system. It was announced that the new storyline the readers would have that power to decide if Robin lived or died. So the readers decided Robin would die by a slim margin, I think, of 1 point. And Robin died in the Death in the Family story arc as he was brutally beaten to death by the Joker. Afterwards, Batman spent a few years alone, swearing he would never take in another kid to be his assistant. But later, he would have another assistant again. Tim Drake was introduced. Tim Drake was more of a part-time Robin compared to the previous Robins, and this was also the first time that the first time that they gave Robin his own line of comics, and it proved very popular. But also, as the modern age went into the 90s, a new story arc was introduced, Nightfall. Batman would face off with Bane, a genius criminal who was abusing a super steroid called Venom. So he was a roided out super genius, but he still figured Batman could best him. So his strategy was release all the criminals from Blackgate and Arkham Asylum to tire out the Dark Knight, which it worked, and he crippled Batman by breaking his back over his knee. This also led into the Night Quest story arc, where young college student John Paul Valley became Batman. At first, he was like Batman, normal, everything, but then later it was discovered that he was a member of the Order of Saint Dumas, and he had some sort of programming, and he started killing the criminals, but also upgrading the Batsuit to be very deadly. Well, eventually, the Night's End storyline was introduced, where Batman healed up and took back the mantle and defeated Valley. And after that, Batman just continued on from there as many story arcs were introduced and one-shots. But eventually, in 2005, DC Comics would reboot again with the Infinite Crisis, which would go into which I will not go into very many details to it because this is a sporadic period that I read Batman comics. So like and subscribe. I got some new exciting projects coming.